Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the power of having a vision. We're talking about a crystal clear vision for what you want and what you want to achieve in life. And I go back to talking to a lot of business leaders and a lot of business owners about that exact question. And so often, I am met with a puzzled look on their face. And it's so important to know what you want. And as you listen to this episode, if you're thinking and you don't have an answer, you'll want to keep listening. So, Dustin, you and I talk about this all the time, and you've got a really phenomenal story of what your life was like prior to having a crystal clear vision. Can you share that with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime a good revelation comes to you, it's usually because of something broke in the process. And as I really thought about, to your point, we talk a lot about how do you create a very clear vision and path to whatever goal you're trying to achieve in anything in life. And so I think back to this was about 7 years ago, and from the outside in, it probably looked like everything was going really well. I was the new CEO of our company, and we were really well positioned for growth. And I was involved in a lot of community things, 2 kids, a wife and a dog, and, happy family and all that sort of stuff. When in reality, what life actually was at that time wasn't even close to that. I mean, I was candidly an absent husband and father. I was gone all the time. I was working 80 plus hours a week. Just burying myself in the work. My health had totally deteriorated. And I found myself at a spot where I'm like, all right, I'm just taking over lead of this organization that I think has all this potential. And what I would say my secret sauce always was in my career up until that point was I'm just going to outwork everybody. As long as I just outwork everybody, I'm going to make a lot of wrong decisions, but it's not going to matter. It's just going to all come out in the wash. And suddenly I found myself at this point. At the same point, so I'm like, all right, this is really simple. I just need to find an extra 30, 40 hours a week somehow. And if I do that, then everything will be fine. And, I don't know that I necessarily had the time, but I was just going to figure it out, right? I would work day and night and just figure out a way to kind of muscle my way through it. And then one night, as I'm actually staring at my home office, my wife walks in and basically says, all right, something's got to give. You're missing your entire kid's childhood. You're never around. I understand the business is important, but like this isn't going to keep working. Something's got to give. And, all of a sudden I'm at this point where I'm like, I don't know what to do. And one of the things that hit me the most candidly was actually the fact that I was missing my kid's childhood. And so I thought about that for a while that night. And the next morning I literally reached out to the school and I volunteered to be my kid's basketball coach. And this is at a time where I just said I didn't have time. I needed more time. And somehow I made this commitment to like volunteer time. And it was, what was interesting about it, and I think was really the revelation for me of the clarity of vision, is I made that decision. I had not solved my original problem. I actually had made my original problem worse. And yet I felt less stress and pressure the moment I made that decision. And it was because what I relate it to is my behavior was actually aligning with what my vision of my life actually was. Because if you would have asked me what my vision was, is I wanted to be a great husband, a great father, a great business leader, and a great community leader in that order. But that's not what I was living. And so the behaviors that I was following, unbeknownst to me, was not aligned with my own vision. And I had done annual planning and I had done all that stuff, but it wasn't aligned. And so that really struck a chord with me. And what it kind of forced me then to go through these step-by-steps and really search for how do I get more clear on my vision. And what I found is if you're misalignment of your why, you're going to get burned out a lot faster. And scarcity drives innovation. So when suddenly now I had no other choice, there was no way for me I just made this commitment. There was no way for me to do the other things that I wanted unless something else gave. I had to find a way to not just outwork everybody. I had to find a way to be more thoughtful. And the revelation all of a sudden became, okay, so what do I actually want to accomplish in the business as well? And what I found myself is all my behaviors I thought were leading to what I wanted, but really they were just busy, and they were all making the organization better. There is no doubt about that, but they weren't the high leverage, high value work that I needed to be spending my time on. And because I was addicted to the improvement, I was addicted to the process, and I didn't have that clarity of vision. So suddenly now, for my family, so for each of my relationships, my son, my commitment was, if I'm his basketball coach, I have to be present. By definition, I have to be present. So then how do I do that for my daughter? How do I do that for my wife? How do I do that for our business? How do I do that for the community? And suddenly now I was able to tie that from my why to what I actually wanted to accomplish, to what a goal might be, to what are the behaviors that I actually need to follow in order to pull that off. And frankly, why I'm not doing that already. And it was a painful process, but I'm a firm believer is usually the best revelations come when you're in the pit, you're in the broken category, because up until that point, I had just found a way to make it work. At least I thought I was, only to realize I was really just heading down a path that was unsustainable.
My story is pretty similar, and I've talked about it a lot on the show. Is it took having a major health scare for me to sit in a hospital bed by myself over a couple of days, thinking about, what if this was it? What if this was the end? And I think that's what it takes, is to truly kind of break or have a life-changing moment. And it was because of that I was able to craft a vision, and not really even knowing what I was doing, but knowing what I wanted to accomplish in my life. And I say that because I remember the first time I asked this to someone else, and it wasn't that long ago, where I asked this gentleman who was very successful, made $1 million a year, and I said, "What is that you want?" And I was met with, and if you can't see me, this blank stare. And if it was 40 seconds, it felt like 5 minutes, where just staring at the walls, looking at the ceiling, looking at the floor, and then randomly blurting out a bunch of different things. And so, when I think about of what it means to have a vision, I think we're talking about things that you want to achieve both personally and professionally. And it's something you've written down, it's something you've documented once, twice, hopefully multiple times, that you can recite by heart. That to me is really truly having a vision. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I mean, but I think I think it starts there. So as I've said, the vision that I can now say for myself, which I don't think it was always this clear, but it was, I want to be a great husband, a present father, a great business leader, and a community leader that helps other people fulfill their maximum potential, in that order. So that's my vision. Now, what I found once I was able to think through that, and it wasn't always that clear, but it was in that category at least. There were things that I wasn't doing that suddenly I found were important. There are things I was doing that suddenly made no sense. And so if I look at as an example, because it really, at the end of the day, to me, the difference is vision also then has to connect to behavior. So I can make that statement, but if I make that statement and I may be home all the time, but I'm not present with my family, I'm never around or whatever, I think it's gonna be really hard to fulfill that vision. And I think I know for myself, that was a bit where I was falling down, right? If you would have asked me that, that morning before I broke, on whether I thought I wanted to be a good husband and a good father, I said, absolutely. Like, that's more important than anything I'm going to do in the business world. But yet there was functionally zero behaviors I had taken at that point that would have ever fulfilled that vision. And to your point, it was because I never actually took the steps to think through it and define what those things are. And I think, what I've seen for a lot of people is a lot of people might do business planning, annual business planning. Here's the things I need to do to accomplish in my career and my business. But they often forget all their other domains. And I know I did. And when you, and I, as I've talked to a lot of people about it, I think the reason being is because they're concerned that if you like write a plan to build a relationship with a family member, that somehow it's going to be less genuine. Right. Which is insane, because so I think about it, my wife. So I married my high school sweetheart, love of my life. But when we were first dating, I mean, I needed to convince her, right? I mean, and so, yeah, what did I do? I would think about, hey, I mean, the first date I got with her was because I lost in a bowling match so I could take her out for ice cream, right? I mean, but I mean, some people could say, oh, well, that was, trickery or whatever. Like, yeah, I mean, I was very thoughtful about like, this person probably should never go out on a date with me. What am I going to do to build that relationship? And then I feel like as people get older, they start to think, well, it just has to be random, right? And yes, it has to be genuine, but I think you can be a lot more thoughtful about relationships than I think a lot of people think. And then the same is true for other things. I'll even use my health as an example. My health was, candidly, and you and I have talked about this, it was never really a priority of mine. I was young, seemingly invincible. Yeah, I'll live long enough; it'll be fine. And until you align it with your vision, right? So if you noticed in my vision, I didn't make any statement about my health because it's not my vision. But I can't fulfill my vision if I'm dead.
Correct.
Or unhealthy, right? Like I need a healthy body. I need that because in order to fulfill all four of those things in the level that I want to achieve, my body has to work. My body has to be optimized, right? And it literally that was the trigger that changed. Like, oh, actually, I do care about what I eat. I do care about my fitness now, not to be a bodybuilder it's because it helps fulfill my vision. And now it's a behavior that fulfills my vision. So now it's aligned. So now it's not, oh crap, I got to go work out again, because that's what it was. Because in my mind, it was never aligned to my vision. Suddenly now it's aligned to my vision. It's like, no, I need to do this because if I actually want to be a good father, I have to be around. I can't be disabled. I can't be unable to run around and chase grandkids someday.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. You mentioned feeling broke at one point. I think we've all been there, and I think a lot of people have felt that, or they've felt being stuck. To me, it seems like not having a vision is the main reason why you're there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Because the reason I was broke is because I was putting in a tremendous amount of effort. I was sacrificing a tremendous amount of things. But because I didn't have that vision, every effort I was doing was actually making it worse. And I didn't realize it at the time, right? Because in one domain, I was getting rewarded, right? I mean, I was the CEO. We were a growing company. There were people patting me on the back saying I was doing a good job, right? So like, it wasn't like I wasn't getting any positive momentum in that one domain. But in the meantime, every other domain is crippling around me. And so I completely agree. And I think one of the things that I have really tried to do is, how do we get to people before they break? And to me, that's what has been the most, I guess, rewarding part of this is, maybe it was a pain that I had to go through, but as we worked through with people about just how to create that vision, to see their eyes light up of, maybe their level of brokenness, right? Like, I mean, I think you need to go through hardship in order to realize when you have it good. But, I don't know that everyone needs to get to a point where they have a really tough choice to make in life. But yes, I think it's that lack of vision of your why, getting really clear on that, but then converting it into a behavior. Because the other thing I will say is, I've talked to a lot of people that have been broke that seemingly will have their why and seemingly have goals, but all their behaviors aren't tracking to them. And that is what creates the alignment. So I'll give you an example. In our business, as one of the goals that we were struggling with was hitting our growth goals. Now, there were high growth goals, but we weren't hitting them. And it wasn't for lack of vision. It wasn't for lack of strategy. It wasn't for lack of goals. We talked about them all the time. But what we realized is, and this is going to sound stupid for those of you that are listening, but it was actually a very single behavior that wasn't happening enough that prevented our growth. We just weren't talking to enough people. Like that was, and that sounds so insane because of course anyone that's growing a business, like, well, yeah, we got to talk to more people. But that happens in everyone's life. And Once you reveal what that behavior is, it's like, well, duh, of course that's what it is. You want to get fit? Well, what do you need to do? You need to eat better and you need to move more. Yes. But what is the actual behavior? The actual behavior might just be, I'm just going to walk into a gym 5 days a week. Like that might be the behavior. For us, it wasn't just talking to more businesses, because that's the easy part, right? I mean, the hard part, we have to make more outbound attempts to try.
Right.
Because that's the only thing we can control. We can't control whether someone's going to pick up the phone. We can't control whether anyone's going to engage. We can't control whether somebody is going to choose us or not. But the one thing we can control is that. And so, it's how do you convert those behaviors to things that you can actually control versus a goal? You actually can't control your goal, whether you hit it or not. You can only control your inputs. And so how do you transition that to what that input is? Because now you have your vision, you have your goals that lead to that, and you have a very clear behavior that you can hold yourself to that aligns with all of that. And then it feels great. Again, I use the coaching as an example. I never felt bad about going to a practice or going to a game. That was never how am I going to fit that in? Because it was aligned to every step of that process. And it was a very clear behavior. Like what is one of the most critical ways that I'm going to show up in my son's life? I'm going to do this. And can I do more than that? For sure. But if I just do this one behavior, all the rest will flow from that. And it's true today.
I love that. So there's probably a lot of people listening to this episode right now, and they're thinking, how do I clarify what matters most in life? And I know if you're listening, you're probably thinking, yeah, well, I want to make more money. Yeah, I want to buy that new car. My wife and I want to have a house in Florida, at least if you're from Wisconsin like we are. But I think it goes far beyond that. So, Dustin, how does one go about clarifying what really matters most? Because ultimately, that is, I think, the first step in crafting your personal vision. Because as we know, your vision is different than mine, and it's going to be different from the next person in line, and that's okay.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the simple exercise that I've walked myself through and other people's through is just a starting point. Just your epitaph exercise. Like, what do you want written on your tombstone? And if you start there, it's not going to be, I had 6 homes, I had this car, right? Like, it really allows you to kind of boil down what actually matters, right? Now, and again, that doesn't mean that having nice things and wanting to make money and growing your career is a bad thing. I'll never villainize that stuff. But to me, it's how it flows to that vision. So if as an example, I'll use myself. So, be husband, father, one of the things that is kind of part of my vision of how I achieve that, right, is spending time with them. And one of the ways we like to spend time together is to travel. Well, travel takes money. I mean, you have to make money in order to pay for those trips, right? Well, that aligns all of that stuff. And it's at the core, it's not about the travel. It's about the experiences I'm creating with those. It's how I'm fulfilling my vision as a husband and as a father. Right. And so I think if you start with, what do you really want on your tombstone? I think that's a stepping stone. I think the second thing is start to think through in your life, if things were gone, how would you feel? Chris, you mentioned it about your health, right? Like, because we've had a lot of conversations around this. I haven't had the health scare to the level that you have, right? But, in many ways, that's a huge challenge, but that's a huge gift.
Yeah,
because
sure.
because it creates a vision for you that just many people would have. I mean, you've been pretty passionate about pushing me on it for that exact reason, because you're like, you just haven't seen it yet, right? Like, and trust me, when you're there, you'll know. And it's a really hard thing to simulate, but I think the more you can say, like, all right, well, what if I didn't have my health, well, what else matters, right? Well, if I didn't have a relationship with my wife, I didn't have a relationship with my kids, I didn't have a relationship with friends, I didn't have, I didn't have a place to show up every day and challenge my mind. I didn't have, whatever those things are for you. If those things were gone, how would that make you feel? And I think that's in many ways the easiest way to really start to get at the core, because, if you just lose that car or lose that home or lose that whatever, if that doesn't really impact you, you're like, well, I mean, I'd like to have nicer things, but I don't, I mean, if as long as I have these things, I'm okay with it. I think that's the easiest way to really get at the core and get yourself to really think through what really is important.
Yeah. And I'm going to say one more thing that I think is really important. I think is mindset. Now, if you're listening to this episode and any of these things resonate with you, I think talking about mindset, there are two things. There's a scarcity mindset and there's the abundance mindset. Scarcity mindset has filled with a lot of negativity, uncertainty, doubt, imposter syndrome, etc. Then you have the abundance mindset. And if you have an abundance mindset, which you're going to need, you may be dealt a couple of bad hands or some bad cards. And in one situation, you could have a massive health scare like me and, fear the worst. And I can look back on that and I can reflect and say, like you said, Dustin, that was a gift. That was a gift from a greater power. And I see it that way because it changed me fundamentally, changed my mindset. Am I glad it happened? I mean, yes and no, but I'm glad because it got me thinking differently and it got me into a stage of motivation that I didn't have before. It got me thinking about, well, what happened? What would happen if this was it? Like, I would have left so unfulfilled. And so in many ways, I'm glad that it happened. So I think that mindset is really clear, really important in crafting a crafting a vision, but also in sustaining that vision over time. Even though your vision is likely to morph into different things, it's likely to iterate as it should. And so I can't go any further without underscoring the importance of having a positive abundance mindset. And then the last thing I think we should get to here is, why do visions fail? And we want to set you up for success. Uh, I think it's really important to, if you've gotten this far and to work through the process, just avoiding some of the common pitfalls. Dustin, what do you see as to why a vision may not pan out?
Well, we've learned this over a lot of pain and anguish, right? I mean, we created the 2020 vision guide, our training and our platform, really all around this. And I'd love to take credit for each step of it, but the reality is it's a culmination of learning from a lot of pain and from a lot of other people. I mean, you and I have talked about it. I mean, what's amazing about this 2020 vision guide is if you complete it, statistically, you're 1,000 times more likely to achieve your goals. And when I talk to people about that, they're like, really? Like, that's the crazy part. Like if you woke up this morning and said, someone's going to give you a path to 1,000x your chance of achieving whatever goals you're setting out in life, and you would just ignore it. Like it blows my mind. But to your point, a lot of that comes down to mindset. And I think the power of it, I mean, it's in the steps. It's in the methodical steps, because as humans, we lie to ourselves, and we lie consistently. We shade truths. We forget things. And so what it allows us to do is start to have the buildings of a framework on how we're actually going to do this. And so like it starts to your point, it starts with your why, which ties into your mindset, right? If you have a strong why, but you really aren't committed to it, or you have this mindset of being a victim, or I'm not going to attack it with intention or anything like that, right? Like you got to deal with that first. But what I've also seen is usually the reason people have negative mindsets is because they actually just don't know what to do. And so if you create that clarity of vision, people tend to improve their mindset, because all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, all I need to do is that. Okay, that makes more sense. And so, from a kind of critical steps, you got to, what is your why? Then set out goals, right? We all know that, setting goals and setting smart goals are really important. The problem is most people stop there. So one of the things we know is by just having a goal and writing it down, you're 10 times more likely to achieve any goal that you write down. And that's if you do it once, right? So already you're in a category of, the 10% of people that will actually write down a goal once a year. But then what happens, right? Well, then, okay, so I have a goal. It's got to be a smart goal. It's got to be clear. It's got to be measurable, all that sort of stuff. But then what happens is they just have a goal. Why do New Year's resolutions fail? Because no one ties it to a behavior. right? They're just like, oh, I'm going to lose a bunch of weight. How? Like, what are you going to do? And so once you tie to that behavior, okay, I am going to walk into a gym 5 days a week. Okay. I'm going to do that. Okay. Now that's a behavior. So now if you just get to that level, you're another 10 times more likely to achieve your goal. So now you're at 100 times more likely to achieve your goal. So then, okay, I take that. What's the next thing? Well, what if you're deciding that behavior, you probably knew that behavior already. There's not a lot of times where we're just like, oh my God, I never even thought of that behavior. But once you get that clarity, there's clearly something that has gotten in the way that has prevented you from doing it in the past. So what is that thing? What is the thing that has gotten in the way? And everyone says time, which of course is a bullshit excuse. It's just not a priority, right? And maybe it's you haven't had clarity. Maybe it's a prioritization. Maybe it's a time of day. It could be lots of things, right? We have real life commitments we have to make. But how do we prioritize the right things and the right behaviors? So now we've identified what are the hurdles and therefore how we might overcome them. So, as an example for me, and I know for lots of people, if I'm going to exercise, it has to be the first thing in the morning. And it's just because my day gets away from me. From a prioritization perspective, it won't happen if I don't do it right away. And that's okay. And so then if I miss it, for whatever reason, I don't need to be mad at myself. I don't need to be stressing about all day. Like, look, I just missed a day. I'm going to move on to the next one. But then the last step is actually where everyone falls down. And to me, it's the last step that is, I don't know if it's the easiest, but it's certainly not difficult. So if you have all this written down, you have your why, you have your goals, you have your behaviors, you have the things that could get in your way. And then the last thing is, what does everyone do? So now you have it written down. You're in a much better spot. People write it down, and what happens to it? They never look at it again. So how do you then just put that in a spot where you're just going to see it every day? You don't have to read it every day necessarily, right? Like, obviously that would be better, but just reminding yourself that, oh, these are things I actually said I was going to do. These are the behaviors I actually committed to myself of doing. And then get over the everyone thinks we need to have perfection. And so the reason New Year's resolutions fail is because I say I'm going to walk into a gym 5 days a week and I only walked in 3. So I broke my streak, so I might as well quit. If you have that written down and you have it as, this is what I was setting out for the year, and this was, so what that you missed it yesterday? Try again tomorrow, right? Like, because more often or not, the reason people don't achieve their goals is not actually because they failed. It's because they gave up. And the reason they usually give up is because they broke a streak. They kind of forgot it's important. They didn't really tie it back to their why. And so to me, that's what's been that power of that vision guide that we've created, is it ties all those things together, which, by the way, if you look at it every day, that's another 10 times. So that's how you get to 1,000 times more. It's not my stats, right? These are and because each of those steps are things that people have researched and studied that, okay, if you look at it every day, if you write it down, you get clear, all those things. And so to me, it's that compounding effect of like, oh my God, no wonder. And Chris, this is the comment you've used. All of a sudden, your goal achievement becomes so simple, it feels easy. So simple, it's fun, right?
Yeah.
And that's how you create that momentum.
Yeah, I love it, Dustin. See, you're learning. Finally, we're coming along here. So, folks, if you're listening to this and you've ever felt, or you have recently felt, stuck in the hamster wheel, burned out, broke, stalled, any of those things, go check out the 2020 Vision Guide. We're going to include a link below in the show notes. So whether you're on YouTube or Spotify or wherever, you'll be able to find a link all over if you follow us. And even if you feel like you're almost there, I still think that there is massive value that you can find from the Vision Guide. We've done workshops like this where we charge thousands of dollars. This can be really a tool to get you to that next level. So again, it doesn't matter what level you're on or what level you want to get to. This is the stepping stone. And this is really the first step to building your own personal strategy for success. And do not dismiss this opportunity. This is really essential because it's part of what's helped us develop massive success, both personally and professionally. Thanks again for tuning in to another episode. We'll catch you next time. Peace.